What up, everybody? It's Bartle here, and today we're going to be talking about my top 5 picks for my favorite horror board games. First up, we have the board game Betrayal at the House on the Hill. This is a classic haunted house type board game where players get a character card that is one of the classic horror movie characters you see in the movies. So you got the nerd, the jock, the popular girl. And during the game, you're going to track your character's mental and physical health, and that's how you determine the health of your character. So how you play the game is you're going to enter through different doorways, and as you enter the doorways, the house gets bigger. Each tile is going to have symbols on them, and these symbols tell you what you're going to do for the turn, including drawing cards, rolling for events, and rolling for the haunt. So at some point in the game, somebody will roll for the haunt, and they will fail their roll, and then something called the haunting will begin. And during this time, players will check in the handbook and see what game scenario will happen. Each game usually has a different scenario based on the card you draw from that room as well as the room itself that you landed in. The player that initiated the haunting or the other players on the board could change and become one of the main enemies of the game. It's at this point the players play against each other, trying to complete their own end goal and win the game for themselves. Next up is the Ultimate Horror Edition of Trivial Pursuit. This plays just like classical Trivial Pursuit, where you're going around the board collecting wedges and answering trivia questions. This edition has over 1,800 horror-based questions related to movies, books, video games, and TV. There are 6 different categories when you're playing the game from different genres of horror. There's gore, psychological, paranormal, comedy, slasher, and creature feature. What I really like about the game is the unique player tokens you get in this edition. You get a demonic doll, a brain with a cleaver in it. There's a straitjacket, a goat man, a table saw, and a zombie hand. Really great game if you love to watch horror movies and you're good with trivia. It's a great game to show off your horror prowess, showing off all the knowledge you have about horror movies. Alright, next up we have 13 Dead End Drive. It's a classic Hasbro board game that's been redone several times. Very retro feel to it. The story behind the game, there's a rich Aunt Agatha, and you're in a mansion full of her employees and her friends, listening to her will being read. The way the game works is that each player is given an equal amount of characters in the mansion itself. You take turns rolling dice and moving around each character. The ways you win the game is moving your character outside of the mansion when their portrait is above the fireplace, or by killing off all of your opponents. This game's great. It has a lot of cool little traps that you get to play with. There's a lot of cool traps. You can drop a chandelier on somebody or push a statue over. I believe there's a ladder. And you can push people into the fireplace. Cool thing about this game also is you get to move whatever character you want. You don't have to just move your own. So you can move your opponents into those traps or move your character out of harm's way. Next up is a game called Terror Below. Now, I don't own this game, but I've been eyeing it up for quite some time. It's a Tremors-inspired board game where you're in the deserts of Nevada and you're collecting eggs and you're completing bounties. But you have to be careful because each round, the more movement is made, the more likelihood that a giant sandworm will appear and you will have to go to battle with it. The way you win the game is you collect victory points by either completing the bounties or killing the sandworms themselves. But you can also lose the game if you lose too many characters on your side of the board. This is a really in-depth game. It has lots of little pieces. There's the eggs and the rubble. There's item cards as well as vehicle cards. Plus you get these great worm standees that get placed on the board. Last but not least is my favorite board game. It's called Horrified. It's a turn-based co-op game where you go up against classic monsters like Dracula, Wolfman, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, the Mummy, and Frankenstein and his wife. So the object of this game is you collect different colored items throughout the board and avoid the monsters. Meanwhile, each monster has their own specific set of objectives that you have to work together to complete. Once those objectives are complete, you're able to defeat each monster and win the game. They also just released a North American Monsters version of this game that has a lot of North American cryptids, like Bigfoot, Chupacabra, Mothman. So if you're really big into cryptids, check that one out as well. It's not a expansion as much as it's a whole another version of the same game. If you're interested in any of the games we talked about today, you can find them using our links down below. Leave a comment down below if you've played any of these games, or you think I missed one that you really enjoy yourself. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Top of building, rifle firmly grasped up in my hands. Looking through the eyes, sight surveying the land. All I see is zombies, so I keep busting off rounds. One shot, one kill, so many corpses hit the ground. Gaze at the horizon, there was still a lot left. But then I saw a sight, and it was quick to take away my breath.